Machu Picchu is the most impressive living testimony of Inca civilization.
It's absolutely breathtaking.
Scientists just found something under Machu Picchu that makes the Great Pyramids look like a simple project. They discovered an invisible river rising from the heart of the mountain, and the city was the only thing stopping a total collapse. This is not just some old pile of ruins, it is a living, breathing technological marvel. The logic behind the construction is so advanced, it feels like it belongs in the future. We are going to show you the data that proves the Inca were fighting a geological war they actually won. Get ready for a story. Giant stone pressure valve. For over a century, the world has looked at Machu Picchu as a beautiful mystery or a royal retreat for ancient kings. It sits nearly 7,875 feet, 2,400 meters above sea level, tucked between two sharp peaks in the Andes. Most people focus on the amazing stone walls or the way the sun hits the temples during the winter. But here is the catch. The part we see is only the tip of the iceberg. New research from civil engineers and geologists has flipped the script completely. They found that up to 60% of the total construction of Machu Picchu is actually located underground. This was not a choice made for style, it was a desperate necessity for survival. Building on a narrow ridge in a tropical cloud forest is basically asking for trouble. The slopes are incredibly steep and the ground is naturally unstable. Any modern engineer would tell you this is one of the last places on Earth you would ever want to build a heavy stone city. And get this, the crazy part is that the Inca knew this better than anyone else. They did not just ignore the danger, they spent most of their time and energy building a massive foundation that acts as a shock absorber and a drainage system. Without this hidden work, the entire city would have slid off the mountain 500 years ago. Scientists are calling it a masterpiece of civil engineering that was way ahead of its time. What most people do not realize is that the Inca were not just moving Earth, they were redesigning the internal structure of the mountain itself. They dug deep into the ridge to place massive stones that could handle seismic movements from earthquakes. This was a city built to stay still while the Earth moved around it. It is hands down one of the most complex projects ever finished by human hands in the ancient world. They turned a dangerous cliff into a stable platform using millions of tons of material moved by hand. For starters, you have to look at the sheer scale of the labor. They were not just building walls, they were building a massive stone anchor. But what lies beneath the surface is even more shocking. Secret of the sponge. When you walk through the ruins, you see over 700 terraces carving the hillsides like giant green stairs. For a long time, everyone thought these were just for growing potatoes and maize to feed the people living there. It makes sense on the surface. But when scientists started digging deeper, they found that these terraces are actually high-tech filters. Each one is a complex sponge built in 4 distinct layers. At the bottom, they placed huge rough stones to create a solid base that lets water move through quickly. Above that, they added a thick layer of gravel and pebbles to keep the flow moving sideways towards central channels. Then came a layer of fine sand to act as a secondary filter. Finally, they topped it off with rich, fertile soil for the plants. See, this goes way beyond simple gardening. This looks like an industrial manufacturing process. Each of the 700 terraces was built the exact same way with total precision. The main goal was to neutralize the greatest threat to the mountain, which is water. This region gets an extreme amount of rain. We are talking about nearly 79 inches 2,000 millito of rainfall every single year. That is enough water to turn any normal hillside into a deadly mudslide. But Machu Picchu stays perfectly dry and stable. The drainage system is so good that water never pools on the surface. Instead, it vanishes into the ground almost instantly. But here is the deal. When engineers calculated how much water this system can handle, the numbers blew their minds. The terraces can drain a volume of water equivalent to a small, fast-flowing river. This is way more than what is needed for even the biggest rainstorm in history. It is a massive discrepancy. Why would they spend millions of hours of labor to build a system that can handle 10 times the amount of rain they actually get? It is like installing a giant industrial exhaust system in a tiny kitchen. It suggests they were worried about more than just the weather. They were building a fortress against a flow of water that most people could not even see. The true volume of water they were managing changes everything. Ancient geological intervention. To really understand why the drainage system is so massive, it is necessary to look at exactly where Machu Picchu is located. It sits right on top of a giant network of geological faults. These are deep, jagged cracks in the crust of the earth where massive rock plates grind and shift against one another. Usually, people see these faults as a huge risk for earthquakes, and they are not wrong. But for the Inca, these cracks were actually used like natural pipelines. All that heavy rain that falls on the surrounding peaks does not just stay on the surface. It sinks deep into the heart of the mountain and moves through this network of cracks. This creates a massive amount of pressure from below, which experts call hydrostatic pressure. Think of it like a giant hydraulic jack trying to lift the entire mountain and tear it apart from the inside out. This is the invisible river. It does not fall from the sky like a normal storm. Instead, it rises from the ground with enough force to cause a total disaster. The location of Machu Picchu starts to make perfect sense once the pressure is factored into the story. It was not a random choice or a mistake made by ancient builders. The Inca deliberately went to the most dangerous, unstable spot on the entire mountain because that was exactly where the water pressure was the highest. They did not just build a city, they built a massive water treatment and pressure relief plant directly over the leak. Those 700 terraces were acting as giant valves designed to catch this rising water and lead it away before it could do any damage. By doing this, they lowered the internal pressure of the peak and stopped the ground from exploding. It was basically a long-term surgical intervention on a mountain that was ready to fall apart. What most people do not realize is that the Inca were performing geological surgery to keep the stones under their feet stable. This reframes the entire purpose of the site. It was not just a palace or a place for kings to rest. It was a high-stakes engineering battle against the forces of nature that most people today do not even know existed. They were not just living in harmony with the environment, they were actively managing its most violent hidden forces. It is a design of flawless balance that has worked for centuries without failing even once. Hands down, the Inca were the first elite mountain engineers in history to pull off a project of this scale. But here is the deal. When the math is checked, the sheer amount of water they were moving is staggering. The system was built with an obsessive level of caution. They were moving millions of tons of material to create a filter that would never clog. It is not that simple to just call this a farm. If the goal was just to grow corn, a much simpler wall would have worked fine. But the Inca were fighting a hidden enemy that was rising from the core of the mountain itself. They knew that if they stopped for even a moment, the hydrostatic pressure would build back up and trigger a massive landslide. The terraces were their way of keeping the mountain on a leash. See, most history books want to talk about the stone walls and the pretty views. But the real story is the war being fought deep underground. The Inca understood things about geology that modern science is only just catching up to. They saw the mountain not as a solid rock, but as a living system full of pressure and moving parts. They recognized that the water moving through those deep fault lines could create enough force to push huge boulders out of place. This is why the drainage capacity is so over-engineered. They were not preparing for a heavy rainstorm. They were preparing for a constant high-pressure flow that never sleeps. It is like discovering a giant safety valve on a pressure cooker. Their solution was so perfect that it turned a death trap into one of the most stable places in the Andes. It is an engineering feat that defies almost all logic, because they were working with materials that should have been too simple for the task. But they combined those stones and gravel layers in a way that created a living, breathing machine. They mastered the invisible river and forced it to go exactly where they wanted it to go. Still active stone plant. The most incredible part of this whole story is that the machine is still working right now. Most people look at ancient sites as dead places that just sit there for photos, but that is not the case here. Even after 500 years of total abandonment, the drainage system has not clogged or broken. That is basically a miracle in the world of civil engineering. Think about how a normal house works today. If a homeowner does not clean their gutters for just 1 year, they overflow and cause damage. But here, the Inca created a system that has cleaned itself for 5 centuries without a single human hand touching a stone. When the heavy rains hit the peak today, the water still disappears into the terraces and flows out of the stone channels exactly like it was designed to do. Machu Picchu is not a ruin in the traditional sense. A ruin is something that has stopped working and just stays as a memory. This place is an active technology that is still in operation every single day. The quiet hiss of water flowing through the stone channels no longer sounds like a peaceful garden feature when you understand the truth. Now, it sounds like a cooling system for a massive engine that never shuts down. Every drop that escapes the site is one more piece of proof that the pressure relief system is still protecting the mountain from a total collapse. The tourists walking on the green grass do not realize they are actually walking on the outer casing of a giant processing plant. The stability they feel under their feet is not just natural ground. It is an artificial balance sustained by 500-year-old technology. It is hands down one of the most successful engineering projects in human history because it solved a problem that should have lasted forever. And that is putting it lightly. For starters, the layers beneath the surface act like a massive filter that prevents any dirt from blocking the pipes. While modern engineers struggle with drains that get backed up by a few leaves, the Inca used different sizes of gravel and sand to make sure their system was permanent. What most people do not realize is that the mountain itself is a living threat. The geological faults are constantly pushing water upward, trying to lift the city and throw it into the valley below. But the machine is always there, catching that water and leading it away before the pressure can build up. The greatest legacy of the Inca might not be the gold or the sun temples that everyone takes pictures of. Instead, it is the silence of a disaster that never arrived. Any expert will tell you that this mountain should have fallen centuries ago. The heavy rainfall and the shifting ground should have triggered a landslide that would have wiped the entire ridge clean. But it stands firm today because the hidden machine keeps doing its job night after night. It is a silent guardian that has outlived the empire that built it. We are only just beginning to understand how deep their knowledge really went. They did not just build a city, they built a future for a mountain that was supposed to die. This is a cohesive tale of survival and brilliance that stands as a direct challenge to what we think we know about ancient people. It is not that simple to just call them primitive builders. They were masters of the earth and the water. They understood how to manipulate the internal pressure of a mountain 7,874 feet, 2,400 meters in the air. This is a level of sophistication that we are still trying to match with our modern tools today. The stone walls are beautiful to look at, but the true genius is the part that stays in the dark under the soil. The machine is still running right under the tourists' feet today, and it shows no signs of stopping. Is this the most advanced machine ever built from stone? Tell me if you think we are still missing a key detail in the comments below. Like and subscribe for more.